Hello, my name is Navigator, and in today's video I wanted to talk about the history of Native Americans in Fallout 76 and the Fallout series. In real life, I am a history major at a university which I will not name, but I also specialize kind of on the side in Native American and Indigenous studies as well as the classical era. But Native American culture, stuff like that, is a big focus of mine. I really have an interest in that, and I figured that I would take this real world interest of mine and apply it to the Fallout series, not only because it is interesting to me, but because there is a lot to talk about regarding that subject. How I'm going to structure this is basically, not really in any particular way. I just want to go off of the information that I have researched, that I've accumulated about basically any kind of reference to indigenous culture in Fallout 76 mainly, but also in the other Fallout games that I have played. The first thing I can really talk about is the names of a lot of the places here in West Virginia. So if I open up my map here, you will see a lot of places on this map actually have names that originate from native origin. Sorry, that was kind of, original, whatever. So the first one I want to talk about is going to be Monongah. So Monongah is an Unami. Unami was a tribe. It's an Unami word, and it translates to falling banks. Now, Monongah, like I said in my last video, is actually an abbreviation of the Monongahela River, or Monongahela River, which is predominantly, in West Virginia and some other states, and it's just, an abbreviation of that. So Monongah kind of means falling banks in reference to that river. So the next one I can talk about is going to be Kanawha. I gotta find this on the map, but I believe it's down here. Yeah, the Kanawha County Cemetery. So Kanawha is it's a Catawba word. K-A-T-A-W-B-A. Catawba. I think that might be how you say it. It's a Catawba word, and Kanawha means place of white stone. I am not too sure the history behind that, but there could have been white stone either along the riverbanks of the Ohio or something else like that that made the original indigenous people name this area, West Virginia, White Rocks. And actually, on top of that, Kanawha was actually in the running for a name of what the original founding fathers wanted to name West Virginia. So this place could have been named Kanawha, which is actually kind of cool. The next one I could talk about is right next here to the Kanawha. This is going to be the Ohio River, as you guys know it, but Ohio is actually nearby. I live in Appalachia. I live in the New York, kind of Pennsylvania region of Appalachia, but the Ohio is actually the translation that the tribes around me, or I guess the word they use when describing the river around here. It's an Iroquois word. I couldn't really find the the exact translation behind it, but it is an Iroquois word. Another one I could talk about is going to be Watoga. Watoga, all the way down here in the Cranberry Bog. Let's see if I can find like an actual. Well, there's Watoga right there. It's a Cherokee word, and surprisingly, this word is sometimes translated as the land beyond. Now, if you guys know, Watoga was actually, promoted and is a city of the future, so land beyond is actually pretty interesting, and it's probably the reason they chose that name for this city, which, doing my research, I just thought that was really cool. Obvious is going to be up here, the Seneca Rocks. Now, the Seneca is obviously the name of one of the tribes that is local to the eastern region of the United States. I'm sure you've heard of them before. I used to live by a place called Seneca, the Seneca, like Seneca cigarettes, stuff like that. Very frequent up where I am. Where I live is very near the Seneca Nation. I'm obviously not going to give you exactly where I live, but I live very close to the Seneca Nation, and I actually have done a lot of stuff working with them and honestly buying a lot of weed from them as well, but that's not the important thing about them. The Seneca Nation, really any nation, any tribe, they have really strong cultural heritage, and I think that they not need to be preserved like they're a historical item or something like that, but it is very important that we preserve their culture as well as any culture, really. It's just important that stuff like that is not forgotten to history. All right, that's a story for another day, though. Let me continue on this. Okay, that's basically a lot of the names of or sorry, the native names of locations in 76. The other thing I wanted to talk about regarding a location is all the way up here. Where is it? Where is it? Here we go. Prickett's Fort. I guess in the Fallout game, I honestly didn't do the research on whether Prickett's Fort is a real place or not. But in Fallout, Prickett's Fort was historically known as kind of like there was a lot of battles going on during the the American, not Inquisition, but the Westward expansion. There was a lot of battles and sieges that were fought off and held back at Prickett's Fort, which was kind of interesting. So although it's not really Native American culture or history, it is history in general involving them. The next thing I want to talk about, should have cleared my throat here because this might be a little in-depth, is going to be the Wendigo. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys know what the Wendigo is. It's one of those scary-ass monsters in this game. It's really creepy, mad, lanky. It looks like that one friend that hasn't showered in a couple days, something like that. And I actually think I have a Wendigo right here, and I do. So there you go. That's what the Wendigo looks like. The Wendigo is actually a Native American, or indigenous people, whatever, folklore story. Basically, what the background behind it, as I'm sure you guys know, is when a human either gets lost or for some reason or another ends up eating other human flesh, they end up becoming crazy. They only have a taste for that, and they eventually turn into something very, very similar to this. Another little side note, if you guys know what a skinwalker is, a skinwalker is also a Native American legend, maybe Canadian too, I don't really know. But I thought that was another side note. One of the actual enemies that we fight is going to be a Wendigo, and on top of that, Oxhorn talked about it in his West Virginian rock video. He mentioned that the Snallygaster is possibly based on another Native American folklore legend, which I thought was really, really cool. So that's the Wendigo out of the way. Looking through my notes here, the other thing I can talk about is in West Virginia, a lot of the historic tribes that were mostly associated with this area are going to be the Shawnee, the Delaware, the Cherokee, as well as Iroquoian-speaking groups including the Seneca, Tuscaroras, the Susquehannock, and the Mingo. So there's a lot of tribes, a lot of history, and looking into the current state of West Virginia, like how many people, how many descendants, how many actual Native Americans still reside there, I ended up finding out that actually there are about 3,000 current actual Native American inhabitants in West Virginia. And on top of that, there's over 11,000 descendants. Either maybe they had a parent that was part of it, a grandparent, something like that. But hopefully, still carrying on that culture in West Virginia. So that's a lot of the information that I want to talk about. Like the factual stuff, but the whole reason that I made this video is I want to know, where is the Native American elements here? I mean, I figured that being in Appalachia, being in the eastern portion of the United States, there might be at least a little bit about the Native Americans. I mean, we have a museum up at Prickett's Fort. Who's to say that there could be like a Lenape or a Shawnee museum, something or other? And listen, I'm not trying to do some shit where it's like representation in video games. Although that is a big problem, and I do support stuff like that, that's not really the angle I'm going for here. I'm more interested in promoting this in the fact that I feel like a lot of the Native American culture would be very similar to the Fallout games. I mean, if you think about it, the Native Americans were very nomadic. They really had to survive out in not the wasteland, but in the land, and that's kind of what we do in Fallout as well. We're kind of like fighting off enemies, hunting, surviving, stuff like that. Although, and I don't want to appropriate by any means, although that we're not, like out there doing exactly what Native Americans were doing, it is very similar. And I feel like for West Virginia, or really any game, focused on the eastern seaboard, I always wish that they had a little bit more of that element of like maybe Native American and indigenous culture in that. I just think that it would be a really, really cool thing. What I'm going to talk about now, to kind of, give the benefit of the doubt to Obsidian, to Bethesda, is that they actually have included a lot of other Native American references in other games. So I'm going to briefly go over them just really, really quickly. The first one I want to talk about, and the one that I have actually had the most experience with, is going to be the quote-unquote Native Americans of the Honest Hearts DLC in Fallout New Vegas. So if you guys have played that, you'll know about Follows Chalk. If you don't know, or if you haven't played it, I'm sorry. Basically, Follows Chalk is going to be one of your companions, and he is part of the, the Sorrows tribe. I believe it's the Sorrows tribe. And the Sorrows tribe and another tribe called the White Legs are actually butting heads. So the The white legs, I'm not too sure if they came from here, if they came from someone else, somewhere else, but the Sorrows, they came from a place called the Res. Now it's funny because the Res is actually a current, modern, and real life slang term for a reservation. So it's funny that, 200 some odd years after the bombs dropped, that word is still being used. And the difference between actual Native Americans and the quote unquote Native Americans we see in Fallout New Vegas is they're not, actual like blood descendants, or they might not be actual blood descendants of the Native Americans, but they most definitely have a lot of their culture. I wish that I could show it off in this video. Maybe I'll save it for another day, but I would suggest you go look it up. Just go look up the White Legs or Follows Chalk from the Dead Money DLC in New Vegas, and you'll see by the way they dress, the way they talk, and it's very similar to, I guess, Westward Expansion Native Americans, where it's kind of like that noble, savage accent, like, white man do this, white man do that, you know what I mean? I don't mean to be racist by any means, or doing anything by that accent. I hope you understand I'm doing this for an educational purpose. But the way that they acted and that they had, I guess, evolved after the bombs dropped, it was crazy to see that they were following in almost the exact footsteps of the actual Native Americans. That was really, really cool. The another side note and a thing that I found interesting about that is, Native Americans, they'll use feathers. They used to use all the parts of the bison, bones, anything to make clothing, to make utensils, stuff like that. And what we see with the White Legs and the Sorrows is they actually use, I guess, leftover trash, leftover clothes, leftover modern era pre-war stuff, and they kind of make that into makeshift clothing. So, what was I going to say? So yeah, so Follows Chalk will have a baseball cap on, but that baseball cap will be adorned with tribal paintings and feathers. He'll have a loincloth on, but it might be part of like a t-shirt, something like that. It's like a hybrid between, the old world and and that is definitely a big theme of that DLC in and of itself. So that's the New Vegas element I wanted to talk about, and on top of that, I want to talk about the Great Khans. The Great Khans are probably a little bit more known because they're in the base game of New Vegas. And I know you're probably saying to yourself, well, hey Nav, the Great Khans, their culture is based on the Mongols. I understand that. But on a minority, there's a possibility that a lot of them could be, from native background, given the region, given, no offense, but the way that they look, stuff like that. It could be assumed that some of them at least, or their ancestors could have been from, native backgrounds. And there are a lot of reservations out west, specifically in the area that New Vegas is set, so it's not super far-fetched. On top of that, although this element is very similar between the Mongols and the Native Americans, the Great Khans, the way they dress, the way they live, they're like tent setup, stuff like that, their nomadic lifestyle kind of is very similar to the Native Americans or indigenous people in general. So I thought that was a nice little side note. I'm looking through the rest of the stuff here. The other thing I could talk about, I guess regarding 76, is going to be Hopewell Cave. I was doing some research and it Dami peoples, I guess they were either a fictional or non-fictional indigenous culture here in West Virginia. There's a guy there, and there's a holotape, and he talks about how they buried their dead like either above ground or in the ground, and how this was a little bit unusual for this culture's burying habits. I was going to include that, but I didn't really think it was super important, so I kind of left it out, but I figured I'd throw it in there, just give you some information so you knew where my head was at. The next thing I want to talk about is going to be the Georgia Guidestones almost of Fallout 76. In real life, there are these things called the Georgia Guidestones, and what they do is it's apparently some artist or something like that. He made these giant guidestones that look very similar to Stonehenge, and they're supposed to be a map, a compass, like shit like that for the end of the world. And they're supposed to be, for the end of the world, but actually recently, I think a couple months back, somebody actually went there and blew it up, something like that. So I guess it's not super impervious to the end of the world. But there is I guess, homage, maybe a nod, maybe it's an actual story element to the Georgia Guidestones here in 76. So I actually haven't been here in a while, but somebody was telling me, or not somebody was telling me, but somebody said on the Fallout 76 Reddit to come south of RNG Station, and on top of a hill you would see these guide stones. So I'm hoping I can find them. I'm going to try to see if they're on top of this hill. If not, though, I won't waste your time. You guys can always go look that up, and I'll just try to wrap up the video. But actually, we did find them, so here we are. Alright, so these are going to be the, I guess, the Georgia Guidestones of West Virginia. It looks like it's raining out here. That's a little unfortunate, but oh well. So, nothing really too crazy. I'm not going to sit here and try to decipher this, but this is actually a very good representation of how the Georgia Guidestones look. It's very similar to this, although it has a lot, the inscriptions are very, very different. A lot of the theories surrounding these like hieroglyphs, whatever you want to call it, some of them involve indigenous people, ancient people, stuff like that. But knowing 76, there's obviously that element of like the Zetans, the aliens. So it could be possible that these Georgia Guidestones are a mix of both. Maybe the indigenous peoples here had some kind of contact with the aliens, and maybe this was some kind of monument to that, some kind of signal, maybe like what do you call it, like a teleportation thing like that, teleportation bay. I don't know. It was it warranted bringing up some theories, and it had maybe possibly some indigenous elements to it, so I figured I would throw it in there. All right, folks, that really goes over most of the factual information, a lot of the, the actual stuff I wanted to talk about. The next thing I want to talk about is where do we go from here, and possibly who are the new Native Americans of the Fallout universe. I guess what I could talk about first is going to be like, where are they? I just, this is more of like a wish or, a promotion, if anything, but I wonder if they will ever add, or maybe there was ever an idea to have, this Native American element or indigenous element to 76, maybe adding a quest line or a faction of people that, upheld these old world traditions, being survivalist and nomadic, stuff like that. I would have really, really loved to see that. The Raiders are very similar to that, but the Raiders are definitely not very friendly. I know the Native Americans might not have been the friendliest out west, but a lot of that is embellished, through American bullshit, propaganda, all that. So we're not going to really say that too much, but the other thing I could talk about, what was I going to talk about? Honestly, I don't even fucking know. What was I going to say? I don't know, folks. You know what? It probably wasn't too important. It was something about, I just wish that there were more Native American elements in this game. I feel like they have just as much of a history as, anybody else does in America. They talk about in Fallout 3, there's that whole constitutional element, and then in Fallout 4, it's kind of the same way. Fallout New Vegas, there's like that cowboy western thing. I don't know. They had a lot of opportunity to kind of add stuff like this, and I don't know. I feel like it kind of fell through their hands a little bit. Could have been a really, really cool concept, stuff like that. So I wanted to get this discussion, all this information out there to show you that even though this stuff isn't in the game, there are little messages or little hints, stuff like that, show the origin of a lot of these places and the culture that still exists even after the bombs dropped here in West Virginia. So yeah, let me just take a quick look through my notes here, make sure I didn't leave anything out, blah 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 blah. Oh, the last thing I wanted to talk about. Okay, so Wastelanders come from all over, bringing the culture with them. This was the last thing I really wanted to talk about. So it would make sense that there should be either Native American NPCs, indigenous NPCs, or, something like that, because not only in West Virginia, but in the surrounding states, the entire eastern seaboard, like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of Native American tribes, stuff like that. It really doesn't make sense to know, there's no like Native American NPC, something like that, maybe some guy who was like, oh, I came from here, whatever. But I just, with the Wastelanders up, good to add that element. Maybe some guy comes in from like a neighboring area and there's some problems on his reservation. I don't know. At this point, I'm kind of just speculating, but I am glad information to you. I'm sorry about rambling on a little bit. Of the names and stuff like that, all of those facts. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I've been wanting to make this for a little bit. It was kind of an idea that I had, and I think it went pretty well. So thank you guys for watching so much. I really appreciate it. I'm almost at 1,000 subscribers, and I cannot tell you how much that means to me. Have a nice day. Take care.